Before diving into this incredible story, remember to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. Here, every story has something to say, and you won't want to miss a single one. New York, a city of light and contrast, where skyscrapers shimmer by day and glow by night, sometimes concealing shadows no one wants to see. Alexander Hayes, a charismatic and enigmatic billionaire, stepped out of his black limousine, but not to return to his opulent apartments or a private gala. No. Tonight, he had a bolder, almost mad, plan. From his office on the 50th floor, Alexander observed the city with a mixture of fascination and contempt. He had everything: money, power, influence, but he wondered if people were capable of kindness without ulterior motives, without self-interest. Was it possible for someone to smile at a stranger simply out of humanity, without being impressed by their status? To discover it, he transformed himself. His designer clothes were replaced by worn, stained, and outdated garments. His shiny shoes gave way to old, dirty boots, and his subtle fragrance vanished, replaced by a smell of damp and dust. Alexander no longer resembled a millionaire, he resembled a lost, starving man, invisible to society. His chosen subject fell upon a chic downtown restaurant, renowned for its impeccable service and demanding clientele. There, he hoped to observe people's true colors, to discover if kindness could exist without reward. Behind the counter, 24-year-old Emma Collins carefully set the tables. She had grown up in a modest neighborhood, and every little act of kindness meant a lot to her. Smiling but cautious, she knew that a smile could brighten someone's day and that a misstep could hurt. That evening, unbeknownst to her, she would cross paths with a man whose entire life contrasted sharply with her own, and whose test of kindness would turn her routine upside down. When Alexander entered, slightly unsteady, bundled up in his threadbare coat, the street air still in his hair, Emma looked at him. He seemed fragile, tired, lost, but behind his tired eyes shone something intriguing, an almost imperceptible gleam, which caught her attention. That night, a simple gesture would reveal more than money could buy, more than the world thought possible. And unknowingly, Alexander Hayes and Emma Collins would embark on a journey of truth, trial, and humanity that would change their perception of the world forever. Rain fell softly on Manhattan, blurring the neon lights and turning the sidewalks into glistening mirrors. Alexander Hayes walked slowly, his threadbare coat clinging to his body, his shoes soaked, and his eyes hidden beneath the hood. Each step echoed in the silent alley, and yet, no one noticed him. For once, he was invisible. The restaurant, Le Chardon d'Or, was just a few meters away. Its elegant facade contrasted sharply with the world Alexander had just left behind. The tables were perfectly set, the warm light invited relaxation, and the aroma of fine cuisine wafted through the air. Alexander took a deep breath and entered, trying to steady his unsteady steps. Emma Collins stood behind the counter, meticulously adjusting tablecloths. When she looked up, she saw the frail-looking man, covered in rain, his clothes dirty and torn. His eyes were large, sad, but polite. Emma hesitated for a moment. In a world where many feigned distress to get something, she had learned to be wary. "Good evening, sir. Would you like a table?" she asked with a warm but cautious smile. Alexander nodded, a slight tremor in his voice. "Yes, just one table, please." Emma accompanied him to a small table by the window. The other customers cast discreet glances, some sympathetic, others amused. Alexander sat down slowly, observing his surroundings, noting every detail, the neatly folded napkins, the perfectly aligned chairs, the customers whispering amongst themselves. It was a world he knew perfectly well, but this time, he was excluded from it. Emma returned with the menu, but Alexander didn't even take it. He stared at the floor for a moment, then looked up, slightly embarrassed. I don't have much money, just something simple," he murmured. Emma felt her heart clench. He wasn't asking for a favor, but it was clear he was sincere. She smiled gently. "Don't worry. I'll take care of you." She made a quick decision. Rather than offering him the usual menu, she served him the dish of the day, a creamy mushroom risotto, accompanied by a glass of water. Alexander looked at the food as if it were a treasure. Each bite was savored with a mixture of humility and wonder. At that moment, Emma didn't know that the man in front of her wasn't an ordinary homeless person. She only saw the fatigue in his eyes, the distress on his face, and a mystery that would haunt her for a long time. As she walked away to serve other tables, Alexander watched her go, a slight smile on his lips. For him, it was more than just a meal, it was the first test. And so far, Emma had passed with flying colors. But the real test was yet to come. The next day, Alexander decided to return to the same restaurant. He wanted to continue his experiment, observe Emma's reaction even more closely, and test her kindness in slightly more challenging situations. This time, he entered even more cautiously, slowing his steps to appear hesitant, almost fearful. Emma was already on duty, smiling but focused. She didn't immediately remember the man from yesterday. Many customers came and went each day, but when she looked up and met Alexander's tired but intense gaze, something struck her. There was real distress in his eyes, but also a strange calm. "Good evening, sir," she said, a little surprised. Alexander nodded, this time murmuring, "Yes, just one table, away from the others, please." Emma accompanied him to a secluded table. That evening, Alexander decided to complicate things a little. He ordered simple dishes, but changed his mind several times, asked questions about each ingredient, requested substitutions, all while maintaining a polite but weary tone. Many waitresses would have been annoyed or would have shown their irritation. But not Emma. She remained patient, smiling and attentive, noting every detail, carefully adjusting the requests. At one point, Alexander looked at her with a slight smile. "You are very patient." Emma shrugged, a little embarrassed. "I'm simply doing my job, and I believe everyone should be treated with respect." Alexander felt a strange emotion wash over him. He had met thousands of people, but few displayed genuine humility and kindness without ulterior motives. He mentally noted every gesture, every smile, every kind word. But he decided to go further. As Emma walked away to serve other customers, he accidentally dropped her napkin on the floor. He didn't mean any harm, but he carefully observed Emma's reaction. Emma returned almost immediately, picked up the towel and handed it to him with a smile. "There you go, sir. Don't worry about it." Alexander stared at her, astonished. In her eyes, he saw neither disdain, nor impatience, nor judgment. Only kindness. For a man accustomed to money opening every door, this simple act was worth more than all the wealth in the world. That evening, as he left the restaurant, Alexander felt a mixture of gratitude and curiosity. Emma Collins had just passed a test that very few people succeeded at. But the real challenge was only just beginning. In the shadows of Manhattan, under the light rain and the glittering neon lights, Alexander knew one thing: this encounter would change something, not only for him, but for her too. The next morning, Manhattan awoke to a mixture of fog and honking horns. Alexander Hayes, still dressed in his rags, observed his own reflection in a cafe window before resuming his role. His features, though familiar to the media and social networks, were unrecognizable beneath the dust and fatigue he carefully feigned. He entered the restaurant, Le Chardon d'Or, with calculated slowness. His objective was clear: to test Emma Collins' sincerity in a more complex, more intimate situation. He wanted to see if her kindness persisted even in the face of injustice or the disdain of others. That evening, the restaurant was packed. The customers were talking loudly, some were impatient, others demanding. Alexander sat down at his usual table and watched Emma manage the crowd. He noted her calm demeanor, her ability to smile despite the pressure, and her endless patience with each customer. Then he did something he knew would be disturbing. He dropped a crumpled note on the floor, and with a fake tremor, whispered so she would hear, "I don't even have a cent to pay." Emma, instead of frowning or scolding, quickly knelt down to pick up the ticket. She looked him straight in the eyes and said gently, "Don't worry about it. You're my client, and I'm here to help you." Alexander's heart sank. He was used to people reacting with mistrust, condescension, or judgment. Rarely, very rarely, did he meet someone who saw only the human being behind the appearance. But he wasn't finished with his tests. He discreetly observed a group of customers who were beginning to murmur, slightly mocking the man in the dirty clothes. Alexander knew that this moment would reveal Emma's true nature. At the next table, a woman snickered and made a sarcastic remark about the poor man. Emma didn't lose her composure. On the contrary, she approached with a calm smile and said politely, "Everyone deserves to be respected, regardless of their appearance." Alexander felt a mixture of admiration and wonder. This was exactly what he had been looking for, pure humanity, unaltered by money or judgment. As he finished his meal, he noticed something strange. A small spark in Emma's eyes, a subtle curiosity, as if she sensed he wasn't quite who he claimed to be. This only strengthened his resolve. The real test, the moment of revelation, would be even more intense. As he left the restaurant in the light rain, Alexander knew one thing: Emma Collins had just crossed an invisible threshold, and soon, the boundary between truth and illusion would be shattered. The following evening, the rain had given way to a cool breeze that rustled the trees and rattled the billboards of Manhattan. Alexander Hayes, still disguised as a homeless man, entered the Golden Thistle with a slightly more confident stride. He had spent the day considering the next step in his test, determined to push Emma Collins to reveal the extent of her kindness and compassion. Emma recognized him immediately as she walked through the door. She smiled, but a small spark of curiosity flickered in her eyes. She remembered perfectly the strange, polite, and humble man who always seemed so grateful for every kindness. Yet, something about his posture, about his gaze, seemed different. "Good evening, sir," she said, a little hesitantly. Alexander replied with a faint smile. "Good evening. I'd like to sit over there." He indicated the most secluded table. This time, Alexander added a little extra challenge. He pretended to ignore the menu and asked for something very simple, almost humiliating for a luxury restaurant: a bowl of water and some dry bread. He wanted to see if Emma would treat this poor customer with the same care and attention as the others. Emma nodded calmly and went to prepare the order. But as she sat down at her table, Alexander discreetly watched her. He noted how she interacted with the other customers, how she even smiled when an arrogant man made a disparaging comment about her appearance. Her patience seemed endless. Then came the unexpected moment. A small napkin had been left on the next table. Alexander picked it up and crumpled it slightly, then dropped it on the floor, discreetly observing Emma's reaction. Without hesitation, she rushed over, picked up the napkin, and carefully placed it in its place, adding a polite note. "Everything deserves to be kept in order. Even the little things matter." Alexander felt his heart clench. But it wasn't just Emma's kindness that intrigued him, it was her perception. She had noticed something in his eyes, a depth, a fragility, or perhaps a secret he didn't want to reveal yet. As he was about to leave, Alexander thanked her in a soft voice. "Thank you, you are truly exceptional." Emma raised her eyebrows, a slight smile, but replied humbly, "Thank you. I'm just doing what I can." In the corridor, before stepping out into the cool night air, Alexander looked at her one last time. He knew she was beginning to suspect he wasn't who he pretended to be. The real test was approaching, the one where he would have to reveal his true identity and discover if his kindness was genuine, even in the face of the shock of an unexpected truth. That night, Manhattan seemed different. The lights shone in an almost magical way, as if they knew that Alexander and Emma's destiny was about to take an unexpected turn. A week passed since Alexander's last dinner at the Golden Thistle. Every evening, he returned, slipping back into his role as a homeless man, observing Emma Collins, noting every smile, every gesture of patience and kindness. But that evening, he decided to take a step he had never dared to take before. As he entered the restaurant, a light, icy wind swept through the streets. He was still wearing his worn clothes, but this time his eyes shone with a different intention. He wanted to see if Emma would react with the same kindness to a small surprise. Emma, true to form, recognized him immediately and approached with her warm smile. "Good evening, sir, your usual table?" Alexander nodded. "Yes, please," he murmured, with calculated hesitation. As she walked away to prepare her order, Alexander noticed an arrogant couple near the front door. The man made a sarcastic remark about the poor man sitting in the room. Alexander felt the need to test Emma one last time. He pretended to be embarrassed, lowering his head, and said in a low voice, "I don't have a penny to pay. I don't want to bother anyone." Emma returned immediately, without judgment, and placed before him not only her usual dish, but also a small glass of red wine, an unexpected gesture for a poor customer. "You deserve some comfort," she said simply. But Alexander did not expect a customer to accidentally drop his wallet next to his chair, briefly revealing a crumpled bill with the inscription of a name Emma vaguely recognized, Alexander Hayes. She narrowed her eyes. Her intuition screamed that this man wasn't just a homeless person. Alexander noticed her gaze, a mixture of suspicion and curiosity, and a slight smile stretched across her lips. You know me?" he murmured, feigning confusion. Emma shook her head, feigning ignorance, but her mind was racing. There was something in his eyes, a different light, a presence she couldn't explain. Alexander stood up slowly, bowing slightly. "Thank you, for everything," Emma replied with a gentle smile. "Take care of yourself." As he left the restaurant in the light rain, Alexander felt a new excitement. Emma had managed to remain kind and humble, even in the face of injustice and absurdity. And yet, she was beginning to sense the truth. That night, under the glittering lights of Manhattan, Alexander knew the moment of truth was approaching. The test was coming to an end, and soon he would discover if Emma Collins' kindness was truly unconditional. Friday night arrived, and the restaurant, the Golden Thistle, was busier than ever. The neon lights of Manhattan glittered through the windows, and the aroma of fine food wafted through the air. Alexander Hayes entered, this time with a more confident stride, still wearing his homeless disguise. But something had changed, a glint in his eyes betrayed his impatience and curiosity. Emma noticed him immediately and walked towards him with her usual smile. "Good evening, sir, your usual table?" "Yes, over there," he replied, pointing to the isolated table. This time, Alexander wanted to test Emma in a different way. He would let slip a clue about his true identity, observe her reaction and see if her kindness persisted even in the face of surprise. As Emma prepared her dish, Alexander subtly pulled something from his pocket, a small locket engraved with his initials and a symbol that could only belong to him, something Emma glimpsed without him noticing. Her gaze froze, but she gave nothing away. Her heart was racing, something was off about this man, and she sensed he wasn't who he claimed to be. Alexander watched the scene, noting every movement. When Emma returned with the dish, he murmured, You don't know me, do you?" Emma shook her head, a slight but cautious smile on her lips. "No, just, you seem familiar, but I don't know why." Alexander felt a mixture of pleasure and excitement. She was honest, human, but not naive. She perceived a part of the truth that he was beginning to reveal, without giving in to curiosity or judgment. Then he did something he had never dared to do before. Before leaving, he inadvertently dropped a small, luxurious document, a 5-star hotel reservation receipt in the name of Alexander Hayes. Emma picked it up, her eyes widening slightly as she read the name. Alexander, noticing her reaction, bowed slightly. "Take your time, you'll understand soon." Emma felt her breath catch in her throat. She didn't yet know what to think, but one thing became clear: the man in front of her was no ordinary customer. Part of her was unsettled, but her instinct told her that her kindness and humanity would soon be tested in a much greater way. As Alexander left the restaurant in the pouring rain, Emma remained frozen, holding the document in her hands. The city's neon lights seemed to shimmer more brightly, as if the truth was about to emerge, and an ordinary encounter had just turned into something extraordinary. On Saturday night, Manhattan shone under a starry sky veiled by light pollution. Alexander Hayes, still dressed in his homeless clothes, entered the Golden Thistle with a calm, almost theatrical gait. That evening, he had made a decision: he would reveal part of his secret, to see if Emma Collins would continue to act with the same generosity and humility. Emma, as usual, recognized him immediately. But this time, she sensed something different in his posture, in his gaze. An aura of mystery surrounded him, and she had a feeling that this unusual customer wasn't who he claimed to be. "Good evening, sir, your usual table?" she asked, a warm but curious smile on her lips. "Yes, thank you," he replied, his eyes never leaving hers. As Emma walked away to prepare her meal, Alexander subtly took a small object from his pocket, a pen engraved with his full name, Alexander Hayes. He inadvertently dropped it on the floor, right in front of her. Emma knelt down to pick up the object. Her heart pounded as she read the engraved name. Her eyes flickered up to Alexander, and she felt a mixture of surprise and confusion. You are," she stammered. Alexander smiled gently, letting slip the first clue to his true identity. "Not quite what you think. I simply wanted to see if unconditional kindness exists." Emma remained silent, the pen still in her hand. Part of her was shaken. She had treated this man with care, empathy, and respect, believing him to be homeless. And yet, he turned out to be a billionaire, someone from another world, almost unattainable. But the most surprising part was Emma's reaction. Instead of anger or resentment, she gave a soft, almost sad smile. "So, I was tested." Alexander nodded, his voice low but sincere. "Yes, and you succeeded. Your kindness is genuine." A silence fell between them, heavy with tension and emotion. Alexander stood up, took a step towards her, and added, "I wanted you to know that what you do, every smile, every act of kindness, has value, even when no one is watching." Emma, touched despite herself, felt a warmth fill her heart. She understood that this encounter went far beyond a simple test. There was something profoundly human in Alexander's vulnerability and honesty, something that transcended money and power. As he left the restaurant under the city's twinkling lights, Alexander knew one thing: the moment of truth was approaching, but what mattered most was what this experience had revealed about Emma. Her kindness was genuine. And soon, he would have to tell her everything. The following Monday, Manhattan was shrouded in a light fog, which made the streetlights twinkle like scattered stars. Alexander Hayes entered the Golden Thistle one last time in his homeless disguise, but this time his heart beat differently. He knew he couldn't continue the tests. It was time to reveal the truth to Emma Collins. Emma, true to form, recognized him immediately. For the past few days, she had noticed clues to his true wealth: the locket, the engraved pen, and even the subtle little gestures that betrayed a world she had never belonged to. Her intuition screamed that this mysterious client was not who he claimed to be. "Good evening, sir," she said softly, a smile mixed with curiosity and apprehension. Alexander sat down, taking a deep breath. "Emma," he began, his voice deep but calm, "it's time you knew the truth." Emma felt her heart race. "The truth?" she asked hesitantly. Alexander removed his hood, revealing his perfectly familiar face, impeccably clean and well-groomed. Emma stared, speechless. I'm not what you think," he continued. "I'm Alexander Hayes, the owner of several companies, a billionaire, and I wanted to test your kindness." A heavy silence filled the restaurant. Emma's eyes filled with surprise, then disbelief. She gently gripped the engraved pen in her hand and murmured, "All this time, you." Alexander nodded, a gentle smile on his lips. "Yes, and you have proven that kindness can exist without ulterior motives. You are exceptional, Emma." Emma felt a mixture of emotions: anger at having been deceived, but admiration for the man in front of her, who had taken the risk of exposing himself, of testing his humanity. "So, it was all a test?" she asked, her voice trembling. "Yes," replied Alexander. "But this test wasn't for me, it was to see if the world could still be pure. And you succeeded." Tears welled up in Emma's eyes. She understood that true wealth lay not only in money or power, but in the ability to remain human, even when faced with the temptation to judge. Alexander approached gently and placed his hand on hers. "Your kindness deserves to be recognized and respected." Emma, deeply touched, gave a sincere smile. "Thank you, for everything, and for making me realize that kindness still exists." That night, Manhattan seemed different. The rain had stopped, giving way to a city ablaze with lights. A chance encounter had just transformed into a life lesson, and for Alexander as for Emma, the truth had revealed more than money or power could offer. The next day, the restaurant, Le Chardon d'Or, was quieter than usual. The regular customers were there, but the atmosphere seemed different, almost charged with a new energy. Alexander Hayes entered, this time without his disguise, dressed in an elegant but understated suit. His gaze immediately sought Emma. Emma saw him and felt her heart race. The day before, everything had changed. The mysterious, humble man she had treated with kindness was now Alexander Hayes, the billionaire. But what mattered most to her was that despite his wealth and power, he had remained human. "Hello, Alexander," she said, hesitant but smiling. "Hello, Emma," he replied, his voice soft but steady. "I wanted to thank you again, not just for your kindness, but for the sincerity you show every day." Emma blushed slightly, a mixture of shyness and admiration. "Thank you, but you deceived me," she said with a slight reproach in her voice. Alexander smiled sincerely. "Yes, and I understand. But I had to see if your kindness was genuine. And it is." To show his gratitude and respect, Alexander invited Emma to sit with him after his shift. They talked for a long time, laughing occasionally, and sharing anecdotes from their lives. Emma realized that he wasn't just a mysterious billionaire, but someone capable of vulnerability, humility, and honesty. At one point, Alexander handed him a notebook that he had kept secret during his disguised visits. "This is everything I noticed during our meetings," he explained. "Every smile, every gesture, every word, it's all noted here." Emma flipped through the pages and felt an intense emotion. Every detail he had observed proved that he had truly paid attention to her humanity, and not to her social position. You noticed all that," she murmured, her voice trembling. "Yes, and I wanted you to know how much this means to me," he replied gently. Their eyes met, and for the first time, there was no mask, no test, no illusion. Just two people who respected each other and understood each other's worth. That evening, Manhattan seemed to breathe more slowly, as if the city itself approved of the encounter. And for Alexander and Emma, it was the beginning of a deep connection, founded on sincerity and mutual appreciation. A few days after the revelation, the golden thistle seemed brighter than ever. Alexander Hayes entered, this time with a serene smile. There was no more disguise, no more test. He was simply himself, and for the first time in a long time, he had nothing to prove. Emma, behind the counter, recognized him immediately. She felt her heart race, but this time it wasn't surprise or confusion, it was warmth, admiration, and gentle curiosity. "Alexander," she said softly. "Emma, good evening," he replied, a sincere smile on his lips. After her shift, he invited her to sit at his table. This time, there was no test, no disguise, no mystery. Just two people sharing a genuine moment. "I wanted to show you something," said Alexander, taking a small, elegant box from his pocket. Inside was a locket engraved with Emma and Alexander's initials, a symbol of this unlikely encounter. "This is to remind you that true wealth is not money," he said, "but kindness, humility, and the courage to be yourself." Emma felt a tear roll down her cheek. She didn't know what to say. "Alexander. I don't know what to say," she murmured, moved. "You don't need to say anything," he replied gently. "You were just yourself, and that's what matters." They remained silent for a moment, enjoying the simplicity of the moment. Manhattan continued to shine around them, but for them, the world seemed reduced to this table, to this shared gaze, to this mutual understanding. As Alexander stood up to leave, he added, "Thank you, Emma, for everything. You reminded me that kindness still exists. And I will never forget your smile." Emma smiled, a sincere and radiant smile. "And I will never forget the man behind the test." They exchanged a final glance, filled with respect, admiration, and tenderness. Then Alexander stepped out into the New York night, leaving behind a precious lesson: true wealth is not measured in dollars, but in humanity, generosity, and a pure heart. And Emma, watching the light rain fall on the city's neon lights, knew that her life had just changed forever.